Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this talk show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. Have you ever wanted to flex or grow your entrepreneurial skills? Or perhaps you struggle with customer service and want to learn how to improve in this area. Well, today my guest co-host, Mimo Lebrano, CEO of Sandhurst Fine Foods, and I are fortunate to chat to our guest speaker, Jim Penman, founder, managing director, and CEO of Jim's Group. Jim famously started Jim's Mowing decades ago with only $24 to market himself to the world. Now, Jim is a globally recognized entrepreneur with over 50 unique trade divisions under his name and over 4,350 individual franchises across 4 countries. Jim is here today to share his knowledge and expertise for entrepreneurs, as well as the criticality of customer service in the business world. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Yeah, good to be here.
Fantastic. And Jim, we begin each of our shows with 2 really fun questions we ask our guests. And we'd love to know from you, as a child, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Well, lots of different things, I suppose. A doctor, a vet, a science fiction writer at one time was my big ambition in my middle, late teens. So, yes, never business, I can tell you that.
Isn't that amazing? It's always the way, isn't it? Whatever we want to be, we somehow take the opposite direction. And what is the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you?
In a sense, it's to do with selling, focusing on the interests of the person you're dealing with. Not so much advice directly, but an experience. I was trying to sell lawn-mowing rounds, and I was terrible at it. And when somebody basically showed me that you've got to be interested in the welfare of the person you're dealing with and focus on that, suddenly it becomes very easy to sell.
Yeah,
so just on behalf of myself, welcome, and I'm very honoured to have you here. It's a real privilege. So thank you so much. So who actually gave you that advice, Jim? Do you remember who it was? It wasn't
so much advice, actually. It was a guy called Peter Rancy, who was in my church, and I went to ask him for advice about advertising because he had an advertising agency, and he just spent half an hour telling me how to advertise and everything he knew. And the end of it, he just said, "You don't need an advertising agency." And as I walked out of the appointment, I knew that I would use him if I ever needed an advertising agency, because the only concern he had in that interview was my welfare and the welfare of my business. So that kind of transformed my business. To me, that's the biggest single lesson I ever learned in business, and I learned it in one day from one guy.
Yeah, that's those light bulb moments that everything sort of falls into place. You go, okay, now I understand the game. Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Yeah. And Jim, most of us have heard your story. You started with a lawnmower, really small marketing budget. But those that aren't familiar with all the details, can you actually share with us your origin story to set the scene for today's chat?
Well, I intended to be an academic. I went to university to learn how to understand how the rise and fall of civilizations. So I studied history and cross-cultural anthropology and psychology, and then ended up with a PhD in history, which basically was with no possible way of getting a job because I wasn't specialized, and history needs to be very specialized. So I just, the only thing I knew how to do was mow lawns, which was my part-time student job. So I kind of merged into it. I mean, really, it's not much of a story, I suppose. But what do you do with a PhD in history? Well, you mow lawns for a living. Everybody knows that.
It's incredible. Well, Mimo mentioned light bulb moment. Was there that light bulb moment when you said you did it as a side job, when you went, okay, I can do this as a full-time business? Do you get that light bulb moment?
Never a light bulb. I was simply desperate. I had no income. I was deeply in debt. I had about $30,000. I was newly married, supporting a wife who was a student. I mean, this is not a light bulb. This is what's called desperation. So I just had to make a move. I didn't know how to do anything else. I had no useful skills. I mean, what could I do? I couldn't even be a teacher because I didn't have a dip ed. That was all I knew. And it took me a long time to actually figure that this little lawn mowing job could actually turn into something quite significant.
So what was the change in sort of mowing lawns to the next level, Jim? That's what everybody sort of, when you decide to scale, how did that sort of come about?
Well, I think the biggest point to make, it's not one thing, it's thousands and thousands of little things.
Yep.
When I was mowing lawns, I was always trying to figure out how to do it better, how to do it neater, how to do it faster, how to travel, how to make my customers more amazed and more happy, how to find more work efficiency. When I got more work that I could handle, what do I do with the jobs? They started off putting on subcontractors, very difficult, lots of problems, started selling lawn mowing rounds. And all the time I was looking at how do you improve it? How do you improve it? Thousands of little decisions. There hasn't been a day in the last 40 years where I've not actually said to myself, how can I do this better? And I mean every day. I mean Christmas, I mean New Year, I mean every day. I'm always thinking about that obsessionally. How can I improve? And it's that. It's not the big brand, big breakthroughs. It's the tiny, tiny little decisions. Like, I'm talking on the phone. I'm talking to my franchisees every day about customer service. How do I get through to them the best way? How can I help them to get better service, but also make them feel good about themselves? What can I say? How can I treat it? What do you do about a kind of customer issue? How can I make my customers, my franchisees more happy? What can we do for them? What sort of training do we need? How do we deal with franchisees who've got real problems in that area? There's just so many things.
Yeah, so this is the first sort of interesting crossroads we have here. When you talk about your customer, I'm thinking I'm a Jim's customer because I'm the guy that has the lawn that has to be mowed. The customer is also the franchisee, of course, because if they can't make the coin, then the whole thing just doesn't work. It's McDonald's in a way, I suppose, but it's a much more customer-centric view of the world by the looks of things. Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Now, my primary customers are my franchisees.
Yep.
They're the ones. Because look, so far this year we've knocked back more than 100,000 leads. Something close to half, 42% of all the leads we take are unserviced. Now we're growing fast. Actually, the figure you gave at the beginning, 4,300, it's 4,600 or something now, and it'll be more probably by tomorrow. So we're growing very fast, but the leads are growing faster still. So we've got lots and lots of leads, and I think mainly because our customer service is very good. But how do you fill up the empty chairs in the training room? We had something like 100. We could do with 200 this week in training. We just need more people. So our major focus is always franchisee welfare. Now, you put a lot of pressure on franchisees to do well, and sometimes they find that very hard. But as I always say to them, the reason we look after customers primarily is not for the sake of the customer, it's for your sake. Because if we look after customers really well, you're going to get plenty of work, and you can charge high prices because we're a high price system. We try to go up a level, and you're going to make a lot of money. And then I'm going to attract more franchisees and keep more franchisees.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Jim, you've even written a book, Every Customer a Fan. Can you explain what that means through the lens of small business owners to have, every customer as a fan? You're talking about customer service is, high priority for you, but through this book, what messages do you have for small or medium business owners?
You've got to focus on making customers delighted as your first priority more than money. Money will follow if you do it well. You've got to quote sensibly and so forth. But look, I knew nothing about business when I started, and there's a lot of reasons why I should have failed. Like, for example, I'm a very bad manager. I'm not particularly skilled with figures or anything. I've got very, very poor personal skills. I've been divorced 3 times by women who couldn't stand to live with me, and that tells you a lot. And the only way my current wife, we've been married for 21 years, she says she has to sort of consider I've got a sort of a mild Asperger's to actually go with me. So, there are 1,000 reasons why I should fail but I am obsessional about customers, by which, of course, I include my franchisees these days. It's an emotional driver that goes beyond all reason. I actually read all the poor surveys that come into our company, thousands of them. I read them individually, personally, and look at them and try to do something with them. And then we have systems of control. And if there's an unfair customer survey, then I'll if it's investigated or the customer is made happy, then I'll delete it. I do that personally. I'm really, really involved because it's an emotional obsession. And the things that upset me most is actually the most thing is a franchisee doing badly. And the things that delight me the most is a franchisee doing well, or somebody giving really incredible service. That's just the emotional drivers behind it, much more than money on a day-to-day basis. The money tends to come. I'm pretty rich, but it's never my primary aim.
Yeah, and so the customer feedback is interesting because I've actually been down that path where you get bad customer complaint. It still affects you, obviously. A customer not a happy customer, you're going to get non-happy customers. How do you deal with customers?
You try and do whatever you can to make them happy. We had something. I'll tell you that we had an absolutely appalling thing happen at the weekend. This is dreadful. It's really upsetting. My daughter, who's in charge of it, was in tears. I can tell you. What happened is we have a conference center, and we use that for training our people. We also let it out. Now, we're very dedicated to health. We're really interested in health, so we want to move into the health retreat. So we organized this health retreat with these 15 ladies. Lovely, really beautiful ladies were to come along and have a really healthy experience. And unfortunately, the chef somehow misunderstood what was to be done and produced meals that were terrible. I mean, he's a really great chef. If you're in for training, it's delicious. It really is good stuff. And I hope you come to eat with us someday and you'll appreciate it. And I like it too. But this is the health retreat. And it was like not natural. It was sweetened yogurt, and he put sort of chorizo sausages into things too. I mean, that's a health retreat. He just had it. And these ladies, they were the nicest people in the world. They were so unhappy, and they didn't blame my daughter Jasmine. And they just were nice about it, but it was so bad. So what are we going to do? Well, first of all, there's all kinds of lessons. We do this again. First of all, he's got to practice on my prospects, on my trainees. He's going to learn how to do it properly and do it again and again and again until he knows how. Next time it happens to, Jasmine's got to be there, which she wasn't that time. You don't do it unless she's there, watching in the kitchen to see he does it right. And then we also need to do some refurbishment because there was some problems with it. And as soon as we've done that, we've got all that together, we're going to invite all these 15 ladies back again, completely free, and do the whole thing all over again to make sure they're happy. And then I'll be satisfied. But it was very upsetting. It really was. But they didn't get what they paid for. They didn't get what we told them they were getting. So, the only way even giving them money back wouldn't be good enough. We've given them a big discount, but they're going to get a whole thing in for free.
And so, once again, it's not that you made a mistake or you stuffed up or you sold a bad product or something happened. It's what you did afterwards, and I think that's what people really get from reaction and how you handle it rather than, I mean, what does Snappy say sometimes if McDonald's gets your order wrong, then, you don't care. If a small business gets your order wrong, then, you want to crucify them,
Well, actually, if McDonald's gets your orders wrong, they're very good that way. I remember going in and ordering, I think it was a strawberry. I meant to get a strawberry sundae for one of my kids, and they gave me a strawberry shake. And I said, "Oh, no, I wanted the sundae." And I probably told them the wrong word, but you know what they did? They took it back, gave me what I asked for, but no questions asked. McDonald's is a great company. It really is a brilliant company, brilliant customer service, brilliant franchisor, shockingly bad food. I won't let my kids eat there. But I admire them greatly. That's great.
And Jim, most of our listeners out there, they're not going to be part of a large franchise system. Is there any advice you have for them, anyone that's struggling to perhaps systemize their customer service within their business? Because yours is feel like sorry.
Look, there's no difference whether you're an independent or whether you're a franchisee. You can still have a great business. The big advantage we have is you're more likely to do it, like the typical lawn-mowing gardening business. And you look up on the internet, attrition rate in the first year was between 90 and 95%. Wow. With us, it's around 12%. Now, once you get going in business, once you've got good customers, there's not nearly as much difference. In fact, one of the reasons people leave gyms is because they get so much work, they go independent. They don't need us anymore, and which we allow. So it's the same principle. Look, when I was mowing lawns, I was obsessional about every detail. I was one of the first contractors to have a brush cutter, so I could do all the edges perfectly. If I saw a little bit of grass that big on the other side of the property, I'd go and pick it up and throw it away. I was endlessly thinking about how to make the job perfect. You know, if I was going to do somebody's edge, you know, lawns, they grow over the edge of the nature strip. You wouldn't even know there was a straight line pathway underneath that sometimes. I would cut it back with a spade. I would take the grass from the cracks in the driveway with my brush cutter and blow it off afterwards. People would say things to me like I never knew my lawn could look this good. And I was always there when I said I would be. I just hated to let customers down. It was just a driver. So if you have that kind of attitude, if you're really passionate about customers, it's not difficult to build a great business once you can get started. You see, what you want from a customer is not just satisfaction. What you want is, wow, this is great. And I had a gym antennas guy come to my place to hang some TVs and stuff and do connections and things the other day. And this is like a 4.9 star franchise. He's got great ratings. And as soon I knew he was just perfect. Everything he did was good. He let me know when he was coming. He took his boots off at the door. He was just helpful, and he went beyond, above and beyond. I don't even know what he charged. He was probably quite expensive. What goes off and up. But cheapest, he was good. I just felt so proud. This guy is giving such a good name. I told him so too. I said, you know, it really makes me feel happy. But everything that he did, every the way that he spoke, the communication, the quality of the work, everything was perfect.
Yeah, because everyone's got a horror story of tradesmen, haven't they? You know, everyone's got the tradesmen who say, "Oh, the tradesmen that left the place messy," or you know, they did half the job, and you know, so you get someone who's attached to a brand and they've got pride in the work and the passion for customers. That's a really satisfying.
Look, I can assure you, it happens with us too. All of our service isn't good. I see it every day. Didn't do from the surveys that come back. The vast majority are 5 stars. Quite frankly, I don't read the 5-star surveys. I only want the ones that there's something wrong. But the key is we do it a lot less than anyone else. So generally, and then when we do make a mistake, we can go back and really try to fix it. That's that reputation. Look, you know, it's been quite astonishing what's happened. Our unserviced leads is actually risen with years. As our customer service gets better, so does the demand for our services get better. We've actually cut back on advertising. You know, we've given back more than $1 million to our franchisees because we can't spend their advertising money. But what are you going to do with it? We just can't spend it. They're busy year round. So many divisions, fencing in particular, mowing quite a lot. We just can't spend the money. So we give it back to them because we're not legally allowed to do anything else with it. We have a vote. So what do you want? Here it is.
It's incredible. This trust that you've built, you know, you said this perfectionism at the beginning and all this trust. We can see it now. I know you mentioned Jim's antennas. The first time we had to get ours wasn't working. The first call I made was to Jim's antennas. And I'm not just saying this because you're sitting here. That was the genuine truth. I was 8 months pregnant with my third child and I couldn't clean my oven. Who did I call? Jim's Cleaners. And it was exactly what it was perfectly done. So this trust that you've created from the very beginning is carried across all these franchisees, and it's just incredible. So is there any tips or tricks you can share with business owners about developing this trust? Because you are a one-person team and now you've got all these customers, franchisees, and yet they're all doing exactly what you're doing. And this trust is just, to me, it's phenomenal.
Well, Natalie, they're not all doing exactly what I'm doing because some of the service is poor, but it's just less likely with us. That's all you can say. Look, the principle is the same, though. Being franchised gives us a huge advantage in terms of time and work. But if you're good enough, you can get a business going. And once you get good customers, look, there's little simple things. You amaze the customer. That is absolutely it. Like if you call them back, we send the jobs out as a text. you have to call back within 2 hours. If you do longer than that, it's a mistake. It's a complaint. It's really bad. Call them back in 2 minutes. Make an appointment. 2-hour timescale. Turn up when you say you will. If you happen to get late, ring the client. If you can't get through to the client, you always text them as well, because most people have mobile phones these days. Let them know. If you email the client, you text it as well. You should do a lot of backup stuff to make sure that even if something goes wrong, you're going to be all right. So you really do everything possible to amaze the customer. The only thing you don't do is charge a cheap price, because that's something I'm against. We actually put pretty hard that our franchisees should make at least $60 an hour. A lot of them are double, that's more. So not cheap, but everything else has got to be amazing. And then there's little things you can do, like, for example, upselling. It's a major fee. So, for example, if I'm in somebody's lawn, I just mowed their lawn. Now, you don't want to ask a direct question, because that can be confronting, and it's also fear of rejection. So what you just say something like, look, if there's anything else you ever want done, look, how does the lawn look? It looks good. It always looks good. Anything else you ever want done, like you'd like some gutters cleared or rubbish removed or some weeding, happy to help. Just let me know. Okay? So use that kind of statement, and therefore let customers know, without putting any pressure, that you're happy to do other jobs. And you also, when you leave a customer, you hand them, it would be perfectly reasonable to give somebody a business card, wouldn't it? You've just done a job, you give them a business card. Okay? So here's my business card, and here's a couple of extra in case you know anybody who needs work done. Letting the customer know that you like more work, letting the customer just jog in their, who do they know? You've done a brilliant job, you've done a fantastic job. If you keep on doing that every time, people are going to start referring you. And then when you're in the street, you chat to neighbours, anybody passing by. Never let a person get in a fight. Just say, hello, how are you? Nice weather, whatever it is. Stop the brush cutter so you don't spray them with nasty stuff.
So is that the only referral system you use, Jim, or do you use other referral systems? That's the main referral technique.
That's what we recommend. Our guys, we've got referrals. Franchisees who've been regular client businesses for more than a few months rarely take much work from the office. Just unless they want to do what we call splits, they build up and sell off sections of their business, which is very lucrative, obviously. Do a split every 3 years, you pay your franchise fee. So, yeah, but you ask for a referral. People will give it to you anyway, but if you ask, you'll get more. But again, it's important to ask in a way that's not putting pressure. You don't want to say to somebody, can you give me a referral? That's embarrassing.
That's true.
Here's a couple extra in case you know anybody. It's not directly asking them for a response. So it tends to work better. So we teach these little tricks of the trade. Incidentally, if anybody wants to know how to run a business, I'm going to tell you how to cheat on us. You can actually do our complete training course, which is a 3-day course. It only costs a few $100s, and you don't have to sign a contract. You just at the end decide to go independent.
I can go to a Jim's training module, and I mean, I sell olives for a living, so I'm sure I'll learn something. So I can pay a few $100 and go to whatever. It's just so cheap.
It's brilliant because you always get a beautiful lunch too, which unless you're a granola eating health person it's not that level, but it's really tasty. And Bill's a good cook for that sort of thing. So you can come, we'll give you lunch, we train you. It's a few $100, and we show you the whole. We actually prefer people to train before they sign. So if they decide they don't like what we're doing, because sometimes people don't like, they find the customer service pressure too strong. It's probably the biggest negative franchisees have. The pressure from great service is really, really tough. And people often get quite upset at me for pushing it like that. And everything that we know business will tell you completely free. By the way, if you want to launch a competing franchise, we'll put you through our franchisee and our franchisor training course, and that only costs a few $100s more. I remember one time, not too long ago, somebody actually rang me up who'd been at the franchisor training course and done all those courses. And she said, "Oh, Jim, I just wanted to say I've just signed my first franchisee." And I said, "Oh, that's great. That's really good. But I didn't know you joined us." He said, "No, I didn't. I just set up my own franchise system."
That's the most
done that.
The most Google phrase these days is, "How do I start my own business?" Apparently, so there you go.
Well, we're the experts. Come to us. Just you can. I don't know. You can tell a porky pie, say you're interested in whatever it is. Just put you through the course, teach you everything, and you can go and do it yourself.
But isn't that amazing, Mima? Like just listening to you, Jim, you know, most businesses don't want to share their secrets or they want to charge for their consulting and yet you're saying we'll teach you everything we know. Like it's just
But Natalie,
incredible.
I'm not being quite as naive as all that, because if you sit through our training course for 3 days, you tend to become what we call gymified. It's very intensive. It's very exciting. You're eating with people and you're hearing these great stories, and you're listening to Dan Carl, who this is a high school dropout. He's turning over $1 million a year and in his franchise business, and wow, this is great. So people tend to come along skeptical and then want to join us.
So surely there is an element of knowing that there is hard work there. I mean, you go to these courses and get excited, but I'm sure you send the message.
Oh, we do it very. Look, we really tell people the hard times. I actually do. I've learned the first 2 hours of the session, which is on Monday morning. I really bear down hard on customer service, and I tell them you're not going to like this sometimes. You're not going to like getting a complaint, but this is what it's about. This is what you can do about it. And people complain. I don't tell them this. People complain it's affecting their mental health. The fact that they get these complaints and they're so worried about complaints because the pressure is quite extreme, and you've got to be able to cope with that. And also, you've got to understand in business it can be very lonely at times.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So I get a lot of people saying I want to start a cafe, and I said the first thing about starting a cafe or having your own cafe is there's nowhere to hide. Is that the same in your case? There's nowhere to hide.
Well, look, running a business is great. Your own business is wonderful because you're flexible. You typically make more money in less time. I mean, it really is good. And if you speak to my franchisees, they'll tell you the same story, the overwhelming majority. But there's no steady income. You're not going to a place surrounded by workmates, and there's not a boss telling you exactly what you can do, what you can't do. It's up to you, and that can be challenging. One of the things we've learned most about franchising is that ongoing support actually has less to do with technical advice and business advice and more to do with emotional support. We find that, for example, it's really important to attend meetings, which is only about 8 meetings a year. It's not a lot, but those 8 meetings a year that you spend with other franchisees is really hugely important to success. So what I would say too, if you're not in a franchise, which most gardeners and cleaners aren't, then what you should do is find a group, a network, like the Independent Mowers Association and stuff, because they're a great bunch of people. So I would join up with them in a flash and go into their meetings and talk, share your issues with them, because they've been through that. They know what it's like, and they'll give you advice and help and stuff.
Yeah. Jim, just a few questions back. You mentioned in one of your answers that the franchisees get back to customers within 2 hours when they request a quote or something like that. And I've seen this because I was looking for a local car detailer, and this was only recent, and I sent out 5. One of them was Jim's. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back from anyone except one within 2 hours, which was someone from Jim's. It wasn't a franchisee. I'm not sure where it came from, but it was a text message that said to me, sorry, we don't have someone in your area that can provide this service, but we can recommend someone, in your service. That was the only one I heard back. It's been days now. So, this trust is just incredible. And I think that a lot of business owners can learn about this immediate response in quote requests and things. Is there a reason why you suggest 2 to 3 hours? Is it just to show this kind of, we're keen, we're here to help, you can trust us?
Well, what we do when we have our job, we promise to call back within 2 hours. And the failure to call back within 2 hours is a serious offence. If you get nothing, you could be terminated. It's really, really, really serious.
Wow.
Not just for once. It takes quite a few times and coaching and retraining and there's all kinds of paraphernalia to go through. So it doesn't happen a lot. So it's very, very important to get out within 2 hours. We actually have a system at the moment called Gyms Plus, which means that if we can't provide service, we're actually recruiting independent contractors to take our overflow work. So about 25% of our unserved leads are now getting looked, and they're actually got the same rating system. If they don't get back to customers, if they get poor ratings, we cut them off. So the actual level of service for these independents is very similar, almost as good as our own people.
I think it's incredible. Like, I own a business in 2 hours. Like, that's really, really quick response time.
Well, actually, it's slow. If you're leaving at 2 hours, then that's really poor. It should be 2 minutes. It should be on the spot. And this happens actually. Franchisees will say to me, like they got a text through on a Sunday, and they say, well, look, I was courteous and considerate. I didn't ring them back till Monday morning. And I said, well, no, because you're down for work on Sunday, so you had an obligation to call the client back within 2 hours on a Sunday. That's a complaint. And the only way you can get rid of that complaint is you do the job, however you manage to do it, and get a message for the customer to say they're happy, and that wipes the complaint. But until that, it's a permanent black mark on your record.
Yeah, that's definitely. And look, I want to ask you, Jim, so many small and medium-sized businesses do fail after 5 years. That's a fact. We know that. Is there any advice you have for business owners that may actually be struggling right now?
Look, the key is the thing I was talking about beforehand. There's one key difference. We have different categories of franchisees. We have gold, silver, bronze, and lead. Now, the key difference, gold and silver are the people who would probably succeed anyway. Like if they were independents, they'd probably succeed because they are just so good at what they do. Bronze, which is the majority of franchisees, is people who probably wouldn't succeed without a franchise system behind them. This is the 90% or so that normally fail in independent business. And then there's the lead, which is probably about 5%. The difference between them is there's only one thing that's different. When something goes wrong for a gold or a silver franchisee, they say, what could I do different? When something goes wrong with a lead franchisee, and this applies to independent businesses as well, they say, it's not my fault. It's the customer's fault. It's the system's fault. It's someone else's fault. I don't need to change because it's not my fault, because everything I do is perfect. And strangely enough, the better you are, the more you're going to look internally, like what happened with this business, with this with the food, the not healthy food. I mean, we didn't blame the cook. We blamed ourselves. We made the mistake. We didn't follow up. We didn't train. We didn't do it. What can we do different? That's the thing you've got to focus on. If you focus on what someone else is going to do, you're very likely to fail. So
does anyone go from bronze to silver? You've had some bronze coming to silver, or likewise, has anyone gone from silver down to bronze? Does that happen?
Well, bronze to silver is what we try and do. Right. So, for example, we're going to run a course fairly shortly, actually, and we're going to have some of our top people like Dan Carl, another person who bought he started 1st of March last year by buying a dog wash franchise. He's got a 4.9 star rating. He's got 7 people working for him already, and by the end of the year, he's going to have 20. This Jared, he's a fantastic guy. So we're going to get him to talk. And others of the same nature who built these amazing businesses, starting from nothing because they're not. So what we want to do is to teach our franchisees to do the same thing. Dan's actually running a region right now in Queensland, and he's actually teaching people to do the same kind of thing. And he's getting them to take more leads and put on workers and so forth and get better results. So yes, our whole aim in our franchise is to try and lift people up. They don't usually go backwards, actually. If you're good at what you do, you don't, with proper coaching, you don't get worse.
Unless there's extenuating circumstances and things happen in their lives sometimes.
Yeah, no, you're right too. Something like a marriage breakdown for men, that's shocking. That can really knock a person apart. You're quite right. Those kinds of personal, that's the most common one, actually. When I got divorced the first time, I was really freaked out. I thought it would destroy my business because I'd seen it happen so badly with so many men. It didn't, because I had a sense of purpose behind me, but still.
The support of a partner is critical. I think that's one thing that we haven't touched on before, but partner support and partner understanding of what you're doing. It's quite incredible that we that are fortunate to have supportive partners can do what we do because those partners are supporting us.
When we're interviewing a franchisee, one of the questions you're going to prospective franchisee, one of the questions you're going to ask them is what does your partner think? We'd like them to get their approval. If they don't agree, they shouldn't really start. There's certain people should not go into business. We had one case, this is a couple, just not too long ago, I think last year, where I got a call from this lady who was buying a franchise for her son, and there was problems with the contract. Now, I was shocked because this boy was in his early 20s. His mother was buying the business for him, and the reason she was buying it is because he couldn't find a job. And I said to her, there is no possible way that you can buy a franchise. I completely vetoed the sale. Not only that, but when the franchisor concerned came up for renewal, which he did last year, I said, we're not renewing you. That was a shocking thing that you did. You should never have made that sale or tried to. So we got, actually, he sold out to somebody else. Somebody just, you could sell. But what we did was this, she actually, when she said to me this about, she said, she was really upset that I'd knocked her back. He said, look, I wish I'd never run you. And I said, look, it's the best thing you ever did. But I tell you what, I know that some of the guys in this area are short of workers. So what I'm going to do is to arrange for your son to get a job. And he went out on the road with 2 of these franchisees. Now, can you guess what happened? He was terrible. He was absolutely shocking. And that's the reason he couldn't find or hold a job, because he wasn't suitable to it. And this poor woman who wasn't wealthy from the sound of things would have spent all this money for something that could never work. That was a deeply unconscionable thing for that franchisor to do. I was very, very upset that he would even consider such a person.
And yet she thought she was doing the right thing by her son by giving him a franchise and doing the right thing. But in reality, it was fraught with danger.
It's actually a pretty strong guideline. If a person's single, early 20s, and their parent is buying them the business, they're going to fail. That's about a 98% certainty. Now, you look at, I've had some great people come through who are young and single. Like there was a young guy called Jason, one of my earliest franchisees. He was young and single, but he was finding the money. Actually, he didn't. I did vendor terms him in, but he'd worked in retail. He'd been in retail management, in his early 20s. So he's like an assistant store manager. So he's a great guy. So I actually vended him in. Later on, he became a franchisor. Later on, he actually went out and launched this scratch and dent business, which was hugely successful, sold that for a really nice amount of money. He's now just come back to launch scratch and dent with us. So he's a fantastic guy, but he's not a typical, young man at all, Jason. He's just exceptional. And I can see that from talking to him and from what he'd done and how far he'd achieved in that short period of time.
So the question I got asked is, Jim, what's next? Are we going to float on the stock exchange? Are we? I'm sure there's a lot of people that are approaching.
I would be very reluctant to float, because as soon as you float and become a public company, you've got people saying, how can he improve our next year's figures? And that's a terrible way to look at the business. You get people like Retail Food Group, who've done such a shambles of the franchising industry. They've destroyed so many great brands and destroyed so many great lives of franchisees. It's criminal what they've done. I really would like to see these people thrown in jail, because they just said, how can I extract the most money? Make my franchisees pay double what they have to pay for it. They can get the same thing in Coles. It is just evil. And I would never want that to happen. In fact, this girl, I was talking about Jasmine, my daughter, who's running the conference centre. One day, I've got 10 kids, so I've got good prospects for the next generation. But I think she's a very good prospect for running gyms one day when I'm no longer around, because she is supremely ethical. She really is a good person, and she would not let franchisees be ripped off. So I don't think we'd ever become a public company. Or if we did, it'd be in such a way that the family was in total control and you couldn't have this short-term rip-off with big business.
Yeah, so right. And Jim, you know what's beautiful? Listening to, you have stories to tell. You're not just someone that, is in charge of Jim's group. You're actually involved at so many different levels, and it's really lovely to see. Time management, I've got to ask, how do you, it's like you're reading feedback coming in, you're involved in the stories, you're helping people that shouldn't be franchisees understand that they shouldn't.
I'm going to tell you the secret, Natalie. This is
I'd love to know.
I am incredibly bad at doing just about everything. I am no good with accounts. I'm no good at management. I really am not. I'm not particularly good at picking people. I am supremely tactless in a lot of ways. So I have great people who do these jobs for me. I've got Rocky, who's basically more my general manager than I am. I'm sort of formally CEO. I've got Cynthia, who's my wonderful accounts manager. I've got my wife Lee, who's looking after marketing. I've got Megan, who looks after Gyms Plus. I've got Kerem, who's in IT. I've got a fantastic bunch of people, all of whom are far, far cleverer and better at their jobs than I could possibly be. And my job is to keep touch with my franchisees. So every single franchisee has my phone number, has my email address, and again, contact me, and I ring them. I ring people on anniversaries. How are you going? What's happening? How can I help you? And I send them emails to say, tell me how you're going in your first month. Most of them reply. So if you've got any problems, just pay for work guarantee. Working. Sorry. So because I'm so bad at doing just about everything, I can actually keep contact with my franchisees. And that's my main job. Customer service and franchisee welfare and service. So immediately, and they can contact me anytime, weekends, late at night, anytime. They'll often contact me because they can't get onto their franchisor, but I'm available. So it's more expression than my total incompetence.
I've got the most important question of the day. Do you mow your own lawns, Jim?
No, not here actually. I do at the farm sometimes. I have a farm I go up to, which I really enjoy looking after, and I mow the lawns there very occasionally, with a battery-powered mower, I might say too.
That is a brilliant question, Mimo. And I'm looking at time. We're actually out of time. So, Mimo, you've got such an incredible story, Jim. I'm sure everyone has learned so much from you. It's been a pleasure. But I'm going to hand it over to you, Mimo, to wrap up.
So we're very, very privileged and honoured to have Jim Penman from Jim's Group, and it's a real icon of business. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're incredibly busy. So the key takeouts are that customer is really at the focus of your sort of mentality. In the early days, you ask for advice, which is what Nick Smith said as well. Fantastic. And every day you're thinking about getting better, faster, cheaper. You're not happy with where you are, so you want to get better.
No, sorry, no, not cheaper, not cheaper.
Sorry. We always say cheaper, but
we actually push for put their prices up. You're so busy, so much work, charge more.
Well, when we talk about cheaper, we talk about driving input costs cheaper. That's what we're trying to reduce expenses. That's what we're talking about. So, apologies for that. So, you've got an amazing system whereby you train very, very well. You are a high-priced commodity, which is good. Money is second. Money will follow if you do what you love. The interesting stat is the attrition rate. If someone starts their business is around 90. If they went under your umbrella, it's dramatically lower, which is fantastic. You do create trust by using referral systems. Your callbacks is amazing, and you actually ask people to do what they say they're going to do. And your upselling is really very good as well. I think from what I'm gathering, you're a very generous and emotional person, because I can pick that up, and you like to share stuff. So there's no such thing as trade secrets in your game. And I think you're happy if everyone else is doing really, really well, which is a really good trait to have. That you don't say, well, this is my idea, and this is my idea. You obviously use networking very, very well, and you shot an example of people that would franchisees will talk about the franchisees, because like we do in Family Business Australia, I've got the Kennard family in my family business group, and we can learn a lot from the Kennards, and they also have the motto, every customer raise their hand. Partner support, having a partner that will support you, or a spouse, or a mother that doesn't get you into business for the wrong reason. That's a great example. And one I heard this week is money and people is really secret. Having money, no shortage of finance, which is a big thing. And luckily, when it's situation of finance or money is okay. And having great people, I think you've hired some good people. And like me, you want to hire your weaknesses, and you realise who you are. So I'm a terrible finance person as well. So that's a really good lesson as well. So that's my sort of summary. Natalie, over to you.
Jim, it has been an absolute pleasure. We could have gone on for hours. So thank you so much for donating your time for Leader Talk. I'm sure everyone out there has learnt a lot. But one thing I do have to ask before we wrap up, for those that do want to actually undertake the courses, and you said they're okay, is there a specific way they can do this, Jim?
Just go to jims.net. Jims.net, and you can get all the information there. Just to show an interest in a franchise. You don't have to buy it. You can just have to come as somebody who wants a franchise. Not that uncommon actually, but most people who come through do buy franchises, of course.
Yeah, just fantastic. Thank you again, Jim. It's been a pleasure. And thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk and for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiac.com.au. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.